Alex Jaffe gave a talk at GDC 2019 called Cursed Problems in Game Design, where he defined a cursed problem as, quote, an unsolvable design problem rooted in a conflict between core player promises. Where core player promises are, quote, a game's essential experiences, why the player came to play. One of the examples he gives is the quarterbacking problem, which is a classic cursed design problem in turn-based co-op games like Pandemic, where players are promised 1. A cooperative experience where each player contributes something, and 2. An experience where you play to win. If you're playing to win, the best way to do that is for one of the players, probably the strongest player, to tell all the other players what to do. That centralized decision-making is far more optimal than each player contributing to the team in their own way. So the cooperative experience, at some level, is inherently compromised. You could try to deal with the quarterbacking problem by limiting how players can communicate with each other. No one player can take over the whole game if no one is allowed to talk. But then obviously you're sacrificing something. You're, at least in part, compromising on that promise of cooperation. In competitive games, one problem you see is the slippery slope problem. Like in chess, if you take an opponent's piece without losing one of your own, your ability to control space on the board makes it a little bit easier to take that next piece, which in turn makes it easier to take the piece after that. You can see this in League of Legends, where killing an opposing character makes your character more powerful, which makes killing them again even more likely, which increases your power even more. In chess and League, you have the core promises of 1. An exciting competitive game, and 2. A game where you're rewarded with power when you make a good play. These are fundamentally contradictory. If you get more powerful for outplaying your opponent, you'll inevitably end up in matches that are decided long before they're officially over. It's just not exciting to watch play continue if one side literally can't win. Luckily, historically, fighting games don't have the slippery slope problem. Like in Street Fighter, a Ryu at 50% health has all of his moves and combos and is just as dangerous as Ryu at full health. In versus games, instead of just one character, players pick teams of characters. And unlike something like King of Fighters, where despite picking a team, the game is still a series of 1v1 fights, the versus series is team versus team, where you can have multiple characters on screen at the same time, or otherwise working together in different ways. I love versus games, and Marvel vs. Capcom 3 is probably my single most played video game of all time, full stop. But versus games introduce some cursed design problems that you just don't have in 1v1 fighters. Like we talked about earlier, fighting games have a built-in player expectation of a lack of slippery slope, where matches are almost never over until they're truly over. Versus games throw that straight out the window. When you lose a character, you don't just lose a third of your life. You lose access to all the team mechanics that involve that character, and this is especially catastrophic if you're just down to a single character and lose access to team mechanics altogether. In Marvel vs. Capcom 2, one of the best teams in the game is Santhrax, aka Storm Sentinel Captain Commando. If Storm and Sentinel die, you're left with Captain Commando on his own, and you've almost certainly lost. Solo Commando just can't really do anything on his own. If you watch enough Marvel 2, you'll inevitably see players just put down the controller when they get down to their last character. Sometimes there's just really no point in playing it out. Ever since Marvel 2, versus games have been trying to solve this problem. Marvel 3 tried with a mechanic called X Factor. I'm going to steal the definition from Infill's Fighting Game Glossary, where it's defined as, quote, a mechanic in Marvel vs. Capcom 3 that greatly powers up your characters, allowing for huge damage, incredibly fast movement, and combos that aren't normally possible. You can use X Factor only once per match, and it lasts longer and is more powerful if you use it when more of your team has died. It can allow for extremely fast comebacks even if you only have one character left. So unlike Marvel 2, in Marvel 3, if you've got one character left, you can activate X Factor so that your solo character has a real shot at taking out the entire opposing team by themselves. If you've played or watched any amount of Marvel 3, you've probably seen the issues with this solution. In a normal slippery slope situation, only the beginning of the match matters. X Factor feels like it flips this on its head. If solo X Factor Virgil or Dark Phoenix can cut through an entire team by themselves, now only the end of the match matters. More importantly, you've broken a core promise of your game by compromising on the importance of team synergy mattering by letting solo characters win so easily. This is another version of the slippery slope problem, and it revolves around what happens in a versus game when a character dies. In versus games, traditionally, the next character comes in from off-screen, and the fight continues without much interruption. Players expect fighting games to reward them for creating an advantageous situation. If I knock my opponent down or get my opponent in the corner, I'm rewarded with a temporary advantage of being able to pressure or mix them up while they're in a state where their options are limited. Character death in versus games has traditionally been treated in the same way, where after killing a character, the attacker gets to pressure or mix up the next character as they come on screen. Predictably, this leads to slippery slope situations, where when you kill a character, not only did you take out a third of your opponent's team, but you might be able to land a hit on their next character before they even get a chance to do anything. And then you might be able to kill them off that hit. I don't know that this is necessarily a cursed design problem in the sense that Jaffe meant it, but I do think it's cursed in some sense. You could just get rid of incoming mix-ups. Dragon Ball FighterZ did exactly that, where after a character death, you're put back in a neutral situation at the center of the screen. I think what makes this a cursed problem is that the solution makes comebacks simultaneously more and less likely. By getting rid of incoming mix-ups, the player who just lost a character is guaranteed to get to play their next character, which at first glance seems like it can only be a good thing. However, if I'm down to my last character in a game with incoming mix-ups, if I do manage to take out a character, I might be able to mix up that next character and ride that to victory. When I'm down to my last character in a game without incoming mix-ups, I already don't have access to assists and other team mechanics, and now on top of that, I don't even have the long shot hope of a single hit spiraling into some kind of victory. Both of these approaches have their downsides. Losing the entire game to a single hit in Marvel 3 feels bad, but trying to make a reverse OCV comeback in Dragon Ball FighterZ also feels bad. You kind of have to pick your poison. One of the coolest things about versus games is that because the unit of play is a team of characters, you're essentially creating a character when you pick your team. Two characters can play completely differently depending on how your team is constructed. This is another pair of promises that versus games simultaneously make. 1, you can build a team of characters you like, and 2, character synergy matters. Again, I think these are fundamentally incompatible. In a card game like Magic the Gathering, you build your own deck with its own strategy and win conditions. Building your deck is just as big a part of the game as actually playing your deck, and it's one of the things that draws people into Magic. However, this leads to the possibility of building a deck that's straight up garbage. If you give a terrible deck to the best Magic player in the world, they wouldn't be able to win. In a versus game, you build your team at the character select screen, and it's entirely possible to build a team that just doesn't really function, even if the game is well balanced. Again, this feels like a cursed design problem to me. For the customization to truly matter, you have to be able to fail at it. If you make it impossible to lose a character select, you had to water down the customization and character synergy to make that happen. In the near future, we have at least 4 games coming out, each with their own spin on the versus game subgenre. Cursed design problems by their very nature do not have a clean solution. The absence of negatives does not make a game fun. The positives outweighing the negatives is what matters. The upcoming slate of versus games will need to choose to embrace these curses, or choose to avoid them by compromising on a core promise in some way. There's no right or wrong answer, so it'll be interesting to see what path they take. If you're interested in more of my stuff or want to support me, here's where you can go. I'm Zissou, and as always, I appreciate you sticking around till the end. Catch you next time.